So last week I watched Cedric Dahl's video about EOS. Is it real or hype? I honestly don't know either, but probably not for the same reasons. I don't know much about how it's viable economically or if it's a good investment. However, I do know a few things about technology. I've been a web developer and entrepreneur for about 6 years, so I know about technology and business, and this is what I want to talk about in this video and answer some of the concerns that Cedric has and try to give some insights and add some value to the table. Also, if you're interested in blockchain tech and development of decentralized applications, this is what I talk about in this channel, so consider subscribing. Let's get into it. Before I answer Cedric's question about do I need EOS to build my project, I want to talk a bit about, the comparison between AWS and security from well-intended regulators and bad-intended hackers. So I don't know much about regulators, but I don't think it's more secure to build an application on EOS rather than hosted on AWS. If you look at hacks, they usually happen on the code you produce yourself that runs on either AWS or Ethereum or EOS. But it's rarely, very rarely a bug in Ethereum itself or AWS itself. These guys are much better at handling security than we are as companies that create products. For example, if you look at the Parity hack, it's a problem in the smart contract, in the code that Parity developed, rather than its Ethereum itself. Now you could argue that code that is open source and running on a distributed system is more secure as time goes by, because there's less and less opportunities for bad-intentioned hackers to hack it, and more opportunities of good-intentioned hackers to say, hey, here's the problem and you need to fix it. But at the same time, code evolves, and there's always new opportunities for hackers to hack code that is evolving. Also, Cedric mentions, block producers being a cartel of people that are vulnerable to attacks. And I think this is like the old decentralization debate, because if you look at Bitcoin or Ethereum, I think there's like only 2 or 3 entities. If you look at Are We Decentralized Yet website, there's only 2 or 3 entities that control like 50% of the hashing of the power, the mining power. So you could argue that it's a cartel of 3 people or 3 entities. And if you think about block producers, yes, there are 21 block producers, but there's also like maybe 100 or maybe more block producer candidates who are waiting to have a spot. I think as much as the mining industry has evolved over the years, the block producer industry might evolve as well. And it will not be about, who has the most hashing power, who has the most resources, who is better at, consuming less electricity, but probably about who has the more trust. The block producers are going to spend a lot of energy building that trust. So in that regard, EOS might actually be less centralized than Ethereum, because if you look at the DAO hack situation, Vitalik Buterin and the Ethereum Foundation took a decision to roll back, and this created the whole Ethereum Classic Fort and the whole drama. Just a single entity took a decision, whereas in EOS it's supposed to be a voting system. Of course, if you look at the token distribution in EOS, you could say that there is about, I think, 10 accounts that hold the majority of the tokens, like more than 50%. So in that sense, they have more than 50% of the voting power. What's interesting for me as a business owner is that, for example, if there is a bug in my smart contract, or there's an issue with my smart contract that is already deployed in EOS, on the EOS blockchain, I could ask for a vote to change it. And this is really nice, because in Ethereum, once your contract is out there, it's out there forever. I don't see companies just, pushing code and it's perfect. That's just never gonna happen. There has to be ways to update your code. If you look at startups today, they push code all the time, fixing bugs, fixing things, and they're very agile. And if you cannot do that in a decentralized platform, then it's a really big problem for a business. In that sense, EOS is a bit more flexible, I mean, on paper at least. Another thing you want to consider when you're a business is design philosophies between Ethereum or EOS. So in Ethereum, they're trying to be very generic and they don't want to make choices for you. Whereas in EOS, there's a few things that are kind of built in for you, and those things are like, account management, recovery, stuff like that. Things that you could say you will mostly find in most applications. And this is the approach that is used by most companies today. They don't want to reinvent the wheel all the time. And one thing I've found painful when developing with Ethereum and Solidity is that you have to import a lot of stuff before you even get started on your business logic, on adding value to the business you want to create. And yeah, I think that's a good point for EOS, because developers are looking for this. They don't want to reinvent the wheel, and they would rather have like some kind of a framework to get started quickly rather than just, have a generic low-level thing that they can play with. Now, I guess you can say that you could do the same thing with sidechains on Ethereum. If you look at the 0x project, that's kind of what they're trying to do. They're giving you tools to build a decentralized exchange. But, we still don't know what the best approach is going to be. I kind of like the multiple layer approach because this is kind of what I'm used to and that it works, that it has proven to be working in the past, but we'll have to see, I guess. Another aspect which is a big debate in the crypto community is scalability, of course. If you look at Ethereum, the few applications that were run there like CryptoKitties or EtherDelta would really like clog the network. I mean, maybe not today, because today people are not trading and it's better, and at least it's really cool because Ethereum has time to focus on what really matters, which is scaling with sharding and Casper and all that good stuff. But anyway, scaling is a big issue because when you're a traditional company working on AWS, you are handling the scalability yourself. You either, make your server more powerful or add more servers, scaling vertically or horizontally, but you're basically in charge of that. Whereas if you build on a platform like Ethereum, most of the work has to be made by Ethereum, which is really nice actually, because you don't want to care too much about scaling, but at the same time you're at the mercy of the platform, like how fast are they gonna be to scale that platform. So if you look at Ethereum right now, it's in the process of scaling. But if you consider that EOS is based on like the graphene technology, which is the same technology that is used for Steam, for example, and Steam has proven to handle like I think 1,000 transactions per second on a testnet, or even 10,000, you have like a sort of a proof that this technology works, and that EOS will be able to achieve this kind of performance. And then you want to consider economics. So in Ethereum, if you build an application, you don't really have to pay for server fees because you just push your code, you deploy it on the network, and it's the users who pay the miners who run the network by paying fees. But in the real world, our users used to paying fees for using a service. So in EOS, it's a bit different. You don't have to pay each time you use the service. You pay for a certain amount of tokens that lets you use the services. So we'll have to see what are users gonna prefer. Are they gonna prefer the EOS model or Ethereum? In any case, as a business owner, I will go to whatever the users want to use. So the last thing you talked about is the alternative to EOS and things like Hashgraph. I'm not a big fan of Hashgraph at all. I think it's like a very centralized system, and to me it's like comparing apples and oranges if you compare Hashgraph to Ethereum or EOS. But if you want to get into other alternative, I think you should take a look at Lisk, for example, which has like a sidechain approach to their scalability, and I might actually do a video on Lisk soon, and if you're interested in that, you can ask in the comment section below. So in the end, do I need EOS? For sure, I need alternatives to Ethereum. I need, easier ways to get started for building decentralized applications. And I think EOS is going to the right direction here. I'm not sure it's going to work out, and maybe another competitor is going to perform better. But to me, it seems pretty good. I mean, there are concerns, but at least on paper, it looks pretty good. So that's it for this video. Like it if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to my channel if you don't want to miss out on the next content. And I will see you in my next video. Ciao.